So with our time this morning, I want to give you all an overview of how we're updating the state water plan. And I think just as important, I also want to share a little bit about how we are approaching that update. Um, just a show of hands, though, before we dig in, how many of you have heard of the state water plan? Wow, that's impressive if you all are being honest with me and not just trying to make me feel good. Okay, those of you that raised your hand, how many of you have actually read a previous state water plan, or at least some sections of it? These aren't documents that you want to curl up with on a Saturday afternoon and read cover to cover. But that's good. I think a lot of you, it sounds like, are familiar with previous plans. Before we dig in, though, I do want to just kind of get us all on the same page of what the state water plan is meant to accomplish. And really all of the key pieces, they're lined out in statute. So if you enjoy reading code, there it is. You can go ahead and look that up for yourself, but I'll give you all the highlights. So the state water plan, it's meant to be a framework to support informed decision making. And our team is aiming to do that at the individual, local, and state levels. The plan will also identify available water resources and recommend strategies and guide efforts to manage those resources. And I think something really important to point out is, the plan, it's not trying to mandate what an individual or a community should do, but it's really trying to bring together all of that data and science and local input so that we can help inform decision making. And this local input piece, I think this is really important. What we really want to do with this plan is make sure that it's reflecting the places and the people that it's meant to serve. And so understanding these challenges at the local level is very important. Our team is meeting with folks here in the Weber Basin and across the state to really learn more about what's working, but also listen to what still maybe needs a little bit of attention. And so through this process, we are bringing together a whole lot of folks with different responsibilities and priorities and really sort of just lived experience. And so I think that piece is really important. And I said I wanted to inform you all a little bit on how we're approaching that update. And certainly my lived experience shapes that. My first, real job after I finished my undergraduate degree at Boulder, Colorado, I accepted a position with the Forest Service in this small Appalachian holler in West Virginia. If you've ever been to Boulder, Colorado, you can maybe assume what sort of a shock that might have been to move to this small town of about 800 people in West Virginia. I learned a whole lot of lessons there, but there's one lesson that really stood out to me in that role with the Forest Service. I was there to serve all people who used those public lands, and I've really carried that message with me throughout my career, including into my role as a state water plan manager. I very much see our team's role as being here to serve all the water users of the state. And our job, it isn't to decide whose voice matters most, but it's to listen to all of the voices, make sure that they're heard and that they're understood, and that so we can get aligned on a shared water future. And this idea of sort of listening first and planning together, it's really grounded in the vision that's guiding the state water plan. And this is a pretty simple statement, but the reality is this is not simplistic. But I think what's important here is balance. We're not being asked to choose between communities, the economy, or the environment. And these are kind of the main overarching themes that are guiding how we inform the information that we put into the plan and how we really sort of identify what are the recommendations that will go into the plan. And so I want to touch on just each of these just briefly. For water security, we really want to elevate material that's going to, and information that's going to help us reduce risk so that we can ensure we have a safe, reliable water supply. And we want to make sure that that holds up under, a variety of conditions, now but also into the future. And collaboration will be key. We really want to prioritize coordination across sectors and agencies so that we're not all working in silos, and so we can all work towards that shared water future. And stewardship, is going to be extremely important as well. We want to prioritize recommendations and information that's going to promote responsible and efficient use of water now, but also thinking about those future generations and what they need. So before we dig any further into this update, I do just want to take a moment to just kind of back up and talk about how water planning has evolved over the years. Water planning 75 years ago looks a whole lot different than it does today. And I think that just reflects the realities of the time in which these plans were written. The situation in Utah was very much different as we look back. And so they were dealing with different pressures. They had new information, and it was a changing state. And so the update that we're working on today, that's really just the next chapter in this evolution of water planning. So as we look at this first plan, and I should say this was not a fully comprehensive state water plan, but this was a pretty big planning document. And really the big focus, this was deeply tied to engineering. So really the focus was on capturing and storing water and getting it to where it was needed. And I think that made sense for the time. Utah was a growing state, and so water security, it was really focused around how do we capture that water and get it to where it needs to be. The 63 plan, it was very much still tied to infrastructure, but the lens starts to widen just a bit. It's not just about capturing that water and getting it to where it was needed. It gets a little bit more into management. So how do we treat that water and really distribute that? And so this is kind of a key focus here, and I think that this is sort of still how we think about water a little bit today. Our water security depends on how well we manage that water, not necessarily on how much water nature provides. Now, by the time we get to the 1990 plan, and again, I should say that this is the first truly comprehensive state water plan. And water, the kind of the focus of planning is expanding significantly at this point. We see entire sections that are devoted to water pollution control, to the importance of fisheries and other aquatic wildlife. And it also acknowledges water conservation as a necessary tool. And this really kind of reflects this idea that managing water, it's not just about getting water to the users. It's about protecting our water quality, supporting our ecosystems, and also using water more wisely. Now, as we get into the early, 2000s, the conversation starts to shift a little bit and addressing something that we've always lived with, but haven't necessarily always planned around. So in this plan, it's acknowledging that water has been made so readily available that its scarcity can be really easy to overlook in this semi-arid climate. And I think it makes a really good point. We need to really recognize this if we're going to plan appropriately for a growing population. So now we're starting to see this shift where we're not just assuming that water is readily available, right? We're acknowledging these limits, and we're trying to figure out how to plan within those limits. Now, by the time we get to the most recent plan in 2021, the shift changes. We see that shift just a little bit more, where we're really tying water planning to climate science, to acknowledging extreme events, and we're also looking at these long-term trends and sort of how they're changing. The plan acknowledges that we really need to look to science and data, as well as continued collaboration as we plan into the future. And the idea is let's build resiliency so that we can be ready for a wide range of future conditions. And we're still very much in that era of planning today. We need to juggle population growth, aging infrastructure, climate variability. And so all of these pieces are really important. And as we think about water planning, just kind of thinking back at that evolution, I think there's one thing that becomes really clear. Water planning has never stood still, and it can't. Certainly, like I mentioned, they're dealing with all sorts of different situations and information. And the water landscape that we're living in, it isn't static. Our challenges and our needs are always changing, so we need to be planning for that. One of the clearest signals I would say that's really shaping this update is drought. And not just a single event, but a pattern. We've been seeing more frequent and severe drought in recent years here in the state. And this year, we got off to a really great water new year. We had all of that rain. There were areas in the state that were setting records for the wettest October ever recorded. And then things didn't continue quite that promising, right? And now a lot of the state is in a snow drought. This is a screenshot from last month, and at this point, 93% of the state was in some level of drought. And I think it's also worth noting that the National Drought Integrated System, they noted that this was the lowest snow coverage in the state since their program launched over 20 years ago. And so I think that this is becoming kind of a shared question. How do we plan for a future that maybe doesn't quite look like our past? And another clear signal of changing times is the declining levels of Great Salt Lake. And I realize that that is not news to anyone in this room. But I think for the Weber Basin, what it really sort of highlights is that, what happens upstream, it matters downstream. And local decisions here affect statewide outcomes. And it really just highlights that water planning, it can't happen in isolation. We'll never get to where we want to be with the lake if we aren't working together. Now, Lake Powell is telling a different part of the story. This is a picture of Lake Powell in 2021, and at the time, this was a historic low. This was the lowest it had been since it started filling back in the 60s. And then they hit another record low the next summer and the next summer. And to me, what this really points out is, as we're planning, we really need to start paying attention to what's changing around us and start thinking about how we can adapt to that change. These challenges, they really show that we need to maybe be thinking about risk and resilience and responsibility, maybe in a different light. Okay, so now that I've brought everyone down, what are we going to do about all of this? These challenges, the lake, drought, declining storage, these are not reasons to panic. These are reasons to plan differently. And so now I want to jump back into kind of where we're headed with the update. And I see this update of the plan responding in sort of 4 key ways. First off, we're planning for resiliency. We are, and uncertainty. We understand that we can't plan for one single future with 100% confidence. And we're also focusing in on resilience with a kind of a core focus on protecting our watersheds and supporting our communities and agriculture. And this plan will continue to be grounded in data and science. Certainly, data, information, evidence, that's what we need to make informed decisions. And we're also coordinating through local input. And I think that this is, again, a really important piece. We want to be learning from folks at the local level what's working and try to align around that shared priority. So as we're planning for uncertainty, our team will be modeling our current water supply and budget, and then also modeling that out into the future. So what does our supply and demand look like, 50 years from now? And we'll be honing in on drivers of change that will affect that. And certainly population and climate are going to be 2 drivers that we'll take a look at. Again, we've got increasing severity or drought that's severe and increasing. And there's also, a lot of areas in Utah that are growing rapidly. So we want to make sure that we're able to kind of look into the future and see how those could affect our supply and demand. And with that said, we'll also look at adaptation strategies. So how can we adapt to this changing water landscape through technology, conservation, policy, and management? And for resiliency, again, we're kind of focusing in on 3 core areas. The first one being healthy watersheds and ecosystems. So the plan will really be highlighting the importance of protecting our natural systems and discussing all of the services that they provide for us. Building resilience, protecting and keeping our watersheds intact, is probably one of the best but often overlooked ways to really build that resilience. And there's a lot of services that these watersheds provide, from providing habitat for wildlife, to improving quality, to reducing the effects of flooding and erosion, and also increasing our storage capacity so we can support those low base flows in late summer. And then we'll also be discussing major threats that our watersheds face. Certainly pollution and invasive species are two that we'll highlight. Pollution has a multitude of negative effects within a watershed that can affect those services that they do provide for us. And invasive species, both plants and animals, they can disrupt ecosystems, they can crowd out natives, and they can affect the quality as well as the quantity of life. And one of the big problems with invasive species is a lot of times we don't even know they're there until they've established their population. And at that point, it can be difficult to impossible to eradicate them. And so this can become a big economic cost to mitigate those negative effects. And that can be a hit to our local communities. Another reason that we want to protect our watersheds is they are a really great place to play. And this, in turn, is a really big economic boost to a lot of our communities. And without healthy watersheds and healthy ecosystems, it really is hard to fully support our communities and our agriculture. So moving into sort of this next core focus area for supporting our communities, we'll be stressing the importance of long-term planning. We really want to be able to set our communities up for success so they're prepared for a growing population and also prepared for the need to increase our energy supply, especially alternative energy sources like geothermal. We also want to be able to seize on future opportunities such as hosting the upcoming 2034 Olympics. And really, at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that we're planning for growth and the need to increase our energy supply in ways that align with our available water resources. We'll also be looking at how we can continue to better manage demand through things like smart water technology, like the use of smart irrigation timers. We'll be highlighting all of the rebate programs and incentives and educational workshops that are available to Utahns to help make water-wise decisions. We'll be stressing the importance of continuing to meter secondary water connections, as well as the importance of continuing to use tiered water rates to reward conservation efforts. And just as we're looking at how we can better manage demand, we'll also look at how we can better kind of expand and optimize our available supply through the repair and replacement of aging infrastructure, the development of new infrastructure, and focusing in on projects, and again, this is statewide, but projects such as water reuse, aquifer storage and recovery, and water loss control. And then kind of that last core area that I'd like to touch on is agriculture. Supporting our agricultural producers, it really is going to be key to a resilient future. Utah, ag is kind of the cornerstone of our identity and our economy. So the state water plan is going to support our farmers and ranchers by identifying and highlighting the programs and all of the financial opportunities that are out there to help them improve optimization of water, and also just highlight all of these programs that they can work with to improve soil and water health. We'll be diving into the best management practices, and we'll be sort of tackling this in two core areas: off-farm, so looking at improving the conveyance and the measurement of water throughout the system, as well as on-farm, so projects that are aiming to improve infrastructure and also to improve management strategies for crop, soil, and irrigation water application. And I'll say there's a whole lot of farmers and ranchers out there that are already improving their irrigation efficiency, and they're already changing management and stewardship decisions to protect soil and health. So we want to continue to do that so that we can have a resilient food system into the future, as well as protect our water resources for the long term. And again, we'll be grounding the plan in data and science. We have a whole team that's working to model various pieces of data, and it allows us to take a look at these long-term trends and test assumptions and really be able to plan reliably into the future and not just thinking about that very last dry or wet year. So again, our team will be modeling water supply and demand into the future. They'll also be estimating conversion of agricultural water over to municipal and industrial use. And what you're looking at on the screen right now, this is kind of hot off the presses. Our team just finished running the 2024 data. And so this is just one of the things that they can do with that current supply and demand data. So this is showing our depletions, diversions, and return flow by basin, as well as by major sectors. And coordination at the local level, again, this is really key. For better or for worse, water doesn't adhere to jurisdictional boundaries, and the decisions that we make in one area can affect the outcome elsewhere. And so really, if we're all working together across basins and sectors, we can start to put all of those pieces together and plan for that aligned future. I just want to give a quick example of what collaboration has looked like to me from my perspective working on the state water plan here in the Weber, because collaboration, it is not starting from scratch here. There is already a lot of great work that's going on. For the state water plan, we've been working with the local Weber River Watershed Council, and it's interesting because I think what impresses me most is this group, it brings together people from a lot of different backgrounds. We have so many different voices that are heard on the Watershed Council, including the Weber River Partnership. They actually have a voice on the council, so they're informing this plan update as well. But what's so impressive is to see folks, and I know that this image up here is a little bit cheesy, but it kind of reflects what I really see when I go to these meetings. There's voices representing agriculture, municipalities, there's conservation groups, recreation voices, and they're not debating, you know, who deserves the most water or what's most important. They're really trying to understand how decisions affect one another. And so it's really been impressive to watch this coordination happen. And one of the things that we've specifically asked of the Watershed Council is to identify challenges and needs here in the basin. So that'll inform the state water plan. So I want to share a little bit of what they've identified as some big challenges. Before I do that, though, I'm just curious what you all think. You know, what are kind of the big challenges when you think about water here in the basin? And I know it could be hard to pick just one. You know, is it drought? Is it population growth? Is it aging infrastructure? Are there any brave souls out there that'd like to share what's keeping them up at night when they think about water here in the basin? They put everyone to, oh, good. Data centers, and yes, that's actually a really good point. And we're not on our heels with that as we're working on the state water plan. That is something that we'll be updating. And there's actually some legislation in session right now, and I don't know all of the details, but they are trying to at least start getting at how do we prepare for data centers coming into communities. Anyone else awake out there and like to share? Yes. Oh, that's a great question. Is there a point where, you know, we've built so much that we don't have the water to support that? And I think an even bigger question is that how we want to grow as a state? I think that's an important question. One last thought, anyone? All right. Oh, yes, Adam. Municipal outdoor water use. Yeah, I think that's a great one too. And we haven't actually discussed that a lot with the Watershed Council. And so that's kind of interesting. So here's what I'm going to share with you. And again, these are not all of the challenges that were identified by the Watershed Council, but these are just a couple that through our conversations kept sort of rising to the surface. Growing demand as our communities expand. That's certainly one that's kind of front and center for a lot of folks. And then we also have, you know, people that are concerned about what is our supply going to be moving into the future, especially with that development. And, you know, drought is adding stress to our surface and our groundwater systems. We also have infrastructure issues. There's maintenance and repair that needs to be done to keep these modern. And then layered over all of that, we need to balance all of the uses. Again, we're not trying to pick what's most important. We want to support all of our uses, so agriculture, municipal, environmental, recreation. And the council also identified some needs that we'll need to meet to successfully deal with these challenges. First up was kind of just reliable and flexible supplies. We need that flexibility, and that's kind of one of the conversations that gets looped in when we talk about Great Salt Lake issues. We also need infrastructure that's ready for the future. Coordinated planning, again, this is going to be really key, and not one entity can solve all of these issues. And healthy watersheds, that's kind of key to most of this. Protecting those systems, it's improving our water quality, it's helping to reduce flooding risk, and just improving that overall reliability for these communities that are downstream. So that slide outlined the needs. This one is just a little bit different and just kind of what we're hearing people talk about as they discuss this. And again, reliability it really matters. Our agriculture, our municipal systems, they need systems that they can rely on. Funding, I think, is top at the list for most folks, whether it's obtaining funding to replace aging infrastructure in the municipal sector to improving agricultural operations. This is going to be critical. And again, that coordination piece is really essential. We can't put all of the pieces together without that coordination. And the local context is as important as well when we consider all of this. What works in the West Desert or the Uinta Basin, that doesn't necessarily translate here to this basin. And the plan, it really needs to honor that reality that each system, each basin is very unique. So I do want to just take a moment to shamelessly plug the Watershed Council. If you would like to get involved, the public can join these meetings. And again, it's a really great place. It's, all of these different voices that are coming together, and they're trying to organize around shared priorities and identify and figure out how to deal with some of the local challenges. They meet quarterly. If you go to this webpage, you can find out how to join the next meeting, when it occurs. And I know we have a lot of water experts in the room today, but I just want to stress that you don't need to be a water expert to engage with the Watershed Council. Your local perspective, your local knowledge, just your willingness to participate is just as important. Now for the state water plan, there is one last chance to really inform the plan. Certainly you can come up and talk to me today, but we will have another opportunity. We just wrapped up a series of public talks across the state this fall. Now our team right now, we're taking all of that information and we are in the thick of writing. We will have what we consider to be a final draft available in July. So we'll put that out to you all and see if it is indeed a final draft. And then we'll have the final document available in December. So if you'd like to be notified for that public comment period or when that final document is available, please do sign up for email updates. So with that, I just want to end, I guess, where I started. Working on the state water plan, we're not trying to find one single answer. What we're really trying to do is listen to all of the voices across the state, find out what matters, and then align around shared priorities to inform that state water plan. Our future for water, it really is best when we plan together. And so I just want to thank you all for all of the different work that you all are doing out there to just make it a brighter future for us here in Utah. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. I'd also be happy to just hear thoughts on what you'd like to see in the state water plan. This was a very brief overview. Is there anything that maybe you think we're forgetting about? We'd love to hear about that. And I'll put up these QR codes while we do that in case you missed those and would like them. Yes, I'll go back here first.
Thank you very much. I was going to touch bases with you, please. Are you familiar with the PWAA, the Public Waters Access Act?
Vaguely. So yes, I'm aware of it, but I don't know that I could speak to detail on that right now. Is there important things that you'd like to point out to us on that?
I would just like to see that it, the public is made aware of it.
Perfect. Yeah, we can absolutely include that.
Thanks for all the presentation. As you mentioned about just extreme water events, everything coming more in extremes, I guess it'd just be helpful to understand, there's kind of a joke that you ask a farmer or rancher, how much rain did you get? The answer you want to say is all of it. But unfortunately, you know, that 3 inches of rain we got in October, in a lot of places, it's just going to run downstream and erode your own farm base. And so whether it be on a farm or ranch or somewhere else, just as you go through the planning, just thinking about what practices, what conditions, both in a xeriscape situation in a neighborhood to a farmland and ranch. There's already programs trying to encourage, but how do we capture all the rain that we get? You know, and sending all the water down to the lake all at the same time isn't necessarily the best practice. And so how do we plan for extreme events to capture all of it in effective ways would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, and that's one of the things that our team has discussed, especially when we meet with local folks of, you know, how can we better capture the storage? So that is one thing that'll be addressed in the state water plan of, you know, are there places where we could maybe increase ways to capture that storage, all the while trying to balance all of those uses, right? So helping the lake, helping keep our recreation and our environmental needs where they need to be. But it's tough, right? I mean, none of this is simple. It's all very complicated, but I think that's a great point. Adam, I think we had a question up here.
I'm curious, is the water plan policy, or is it advisory, or what, you know, does it mandate stuff? I'm curious, what is its clout or authority? So that's my question.
I guess the short answer is we don't have any teeth. So the Division of Water Resources, we are not a regulatory agency. So this is not a regulatory document. However, you know, we tell everyone that we write the plan for all water users, but certainly our legislators are one key audience that we focus on with this. And so we really try to write this so that there's recommendations so folks can talk to the legislators and point out some of these facts. And the 2021 plan, you know, we listed out goals and recommendations, and I believe it's somewhere between 75 to 80% of those goals were hit or they are a work in progress. So it very much does, I think, make a difference. I mean, it's an important plan, but we are not regulatory.
I was wondering if your plan includes recharging the water table.
That's a great question. I will say that one of the things that we've discussed with a lot of groups is concerns about, you know, understanding what is the connection between surface and groundwater, and do we really know what our aquifer withdrawal and recharge rates are? So this is a big concern. It's something that we will be addressing that needs to be studied. And then also, you know, how do we deal with that? Because we do have areas in Utah that are experiencing some pretty serious issues, because once that aquifer gets withdrawn to a point, you know, there's a level where there's not enough water to keep that pore space open, and that aquifer will compact. And now it won't store the water, even if we had it to put into that. So we'll be looking into that absolutely and addressing that. It's a great question.
I'm sorry, I haven't read the plan, I confess.
I thought I saw your hand go up at the beginning.
But I'd like to know, is there anything in there about protecting riparian buffers?
Absolutely. So we'll have an entire chapter that's devoted to healthy watersheds and ecosystems. And so the riparian area is something we'll be addressing of kind of what are those best management practices, what do we need to do to protect them? Because that really is an important, it's a small proportion of the watershed, but, its value is really significant in terms of protecting for water quality, for erosion, for providing habitat. I mean, there's so many species of wildlife that rely on riparian areas for some stage of their life cycle.
Maybe one more, if there is one. Otherwise, another round of applause for Stephanie. Thank you so much for speaking
Thank
to
you
the water
all.
plan.